Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. We're on the workbench today, and on the workbench at the moment are my two most valuable orchids. And I thought I'm going to repot them, yes, but I thought we'd take the opportunity of doing an analysis. When a plant's not growing as well as it should, you have to look at the possible reasons why not. And it could well be more than one, or two, or even three. It could be a combination of things compounding each other, making each one worse. Yeah? So we'll have a look and a chat about that. So I'll move the camera down. This is a high up view, looking down on it, because it's the only way I can really show you what's going on. If I pick a plant up, then we can have a look and see what that looks like on the camera. Yes, so if I'm holding the plant up there, you can still see it, and if it's down in the tray, you can see it. Right, both of these plants are effectively the same cross, but they are quite different, even though they've got the same name. And technically it's Oncidium, Odontoglossum, tippling. And I've got a pale form and a dark form of the same cross. When you produce a cross from seed, in other words, you take the pollen from one and pollinate a flower on another, you get seedlings, hopefully, and you grow them on until they get to flower. And when they flower, they can be quite varied, and this is a prime example of that, where they are the same plant, but one is quite a pale form and one is a much darker form, but technically they are the same plant. Right, so what's gone wrong then? Well, first of all, the last bulb that I grew, which did bloom, the leaves were too long. Yeah? Why were they too long? Well, you got choices. Too much feed, which on something like an Odontoglossum is quite possible. They are very low feeders. They really do not like salts in the pot. They like a nice clean media, very low feed levels. So it could be that. What else could it be? Too little light. Well, unlikely, as these are quite shade, I won't say deep shade lovers, but these don't like bright light. So not enough light is probably, we can rule that out. Also, since I got it, the bulbs have shriveled quite a bit. Well, reasons for bulbs shriveling: lack of hydration normally. It can be lack of nutrients. Moving on, if it's lack of hydration, why? Well, first of all, was I giving it enough water? We'll come on to that. Highly unlikely it was too little water. What else could it be then? Well, it could be too much water. In other words, the media is staying too wet, which would break the moss down and start turning the media acidic. Not good. The other reason, pH wrong. Yeah, and it's not getting its nutrients. Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah, we've got a moss, quite heavy on the moss here, and therein, I believe, lies the problem. There's too much moss. Why is there too much moss? Well, there could be two main reasons. Firstly, the mix was a higher percentage of moss than perhaps it should have been. But just look, what's the other reason? Have a look at the other one and it'll stick out like a sore thumb. How can there be too much moss? The pot's too big. Yeah? And if the pot's too big, the root system won't use up the moisture. It'll remain too wet. Now these types of odonts are strange because they come into the category of they need to be constantly moist, but they really, really do not like being wet. The roots will rot sooner than you can look at them. And what we've got going on here, why I've chosen to repot, first of all, we have our new growth coming. Yeah, that will produce new roots. See how I said will produce new roots? If the plant lives, it will produce new roots. Now I'm going to take this out And therein lies problem number one. You can see it straight away. Only half the media came out. Well, that's a lack of roots, isn't it? Otherwise it would have been down into the bottom of the pot. Pot's too big. So that's that. Now I'm going to... These have come from Mathers, and I know Jim's repotting cycle or potting on cycle. Basically at the end of year 2 the plant will be potted on. That's how I got them, and I did that potting on. The end of the 3rd year, which is where these are now, as they come back into growth, Jim does a complete repot, and it's frightening how he treats them. On this plant he would probably cut every root off right down to the base, knowing that a new root system's coming soon. Now I'm not sure I can do that, but we will let as much of this fall off as possible. And you have to bear in mind some of this will be old media. I'm treating it gently. These are fragile roots. Look, we do have some active roots growing on this one, so that's good. The roots are coming into growth in places. Just gently teasing this out. There's no rough stuff. But then we've got a rotting pseudo bulb here, and we've got a pseudo bulb back here that is not serving any purpose at the moment. Then we've got another one which I will keep because of its size, and then another one with leaves which I will keep. So what are we getting rid of then? There's my skizzers. We're getting rid of this back to there. The reason I'm doing this now is before I finish messing with the roots, is a lot of the roots will just come off with those pseudo bulbs. Now we're looking at a plant more like what Jim would show in his, so I want to tease this root out if I can. Just trying to work out which way it goes. Oh, it is actually attached to this bit, so we need to gently pull it out then. Come on, let go. There we go. Right, so our active roots are still here, that's good. But we do still have some manky ones. There. These are dead. All sheaths off, something Jim does methodically. And the base of these bulbs is wet. Well, this media's been staying too wet. And the main reason for the media staying too wet is there's too much of it. It's as simple as that. Pot too big. Right, I'm going to hopefully gently take this sheath off, because I want the new growth, roots on that new growth to get down in the media. Right, how are we doing then? If some of the older roots stay there, in my case I'm not that fussed. As I said, Jim would probably just chop most of these off. I'd like to take that huge section there off. The trouble is when you get a root that looks dead and then you follow it down and find you've just cut off the few active root tips that you've got, I think it's better not to take the risk and just leave the roots. Right. Old flower spike. Right, that doesn't look like much of a 3-year-old plant, does it? And it isn't. It just isn't. It should be bigger than this. But hopefully this next bulb will grow into a nice big fat bulb. Another dead root there, we'll have that one off. See, if you notice, all of the roots are coming off the back of the plant. And this was the problem. The growth that I did, that actually bloomed, didn't grow any roots. None. There are no roots coming off that pseudo bulb. Whether it will ever grow any now, I don't know, but hopefully the new growth will. So I'm not going to do anything else to that. So I'm just looking at these great big fat roots that are definitely dead, which we can get rid of safely. But I'm not going to risk anything else in case there are some active growing tips. I just want to gently pull this bit because it's separated, therefore it's a nice chunk of dead roots coming off. Well, that's all I'm going to take off. If I take this one off, what do I lose? Do I lose any active root tips? No, I don't. Right, so we can take that off. Because all I'm looking for is does a root contain any active growing tips? And if it doesn't, that's all that's left. Now I've seen Jim, this is Jim Durran at Mathers, by the way. I've seen him pot up these with less roots than that. But then they're going to grow on in the nursery in perfect conditions, conditions evolved over many, many years. So we will just pop that on the bench for the now. Get rid of the flack, and then we'll do the same to the other one, and I suspect we will have even less good roots on this one because this one really is in a giant pot. And the only reason I can think it's in a pot that big is that when I potted it, it had loads of roots. Now this is a much bigger, stronger plant. It's got a shriveled bulb, but nonetheless it has a proper set of leaves, 2 side leaves and a single one coming out the top. Again, the growth that I grew, leaves too long. This is what the leaves should look like, and this is what I grew, long and thin. So something was going wrong there. We have one bulb at the back that needs coming off. So let's see what we've got. I can see in the pot there's a lot more roots on this one. That doesn't mean to say they're good roots. The trouble is with this one is I don't see any active growing roots like we did on the other one. At least we had a few that will get going. And I think most of these are just very old roots. And there's a very compact centre here. So when I did this one, I really did pot it on. So I'm still carefully looking to see if there are any active roots tucked away in here. But I don't think there are. There's a mass of roots though. I can't repot it with all these roots because most of them are going to die off, and then we'll have a pot full of dead roots. But there is a huge amount. Try and unravel some of them because some of them are going round in a circle. That probably happened before I got the plant. They were probably wrapped round inside the pot. And they got left when I potted it on. Right, I need to trim these off. But I haven't got any sterilising equipment for my scissors. They were sterile when I worked on that plant, but to avoid any cross-contamination, I'm going to cheat because I've got a second pair of scissors. Yeah, I've got a second pair, so rather than muck about sterilising those, I'll just get the second pair. So again, we want the oldest bulb off, and then we'll see what amount of the root mass comes off with it. Let's just separate these scissors so they don't get mucked up. Non-sterile. See, this is why a lot of the old root system will come off with that bulb, and that saves me worrying about it. Should I take this other one off? I think I should. Then we'll have a nice compact plant. Yeah, I'm going to take that one off as well. It's so shriveled it can't be doing any good for the plant. It's not like it's holding a lot of reserves, there's next to nothing of it. That will take care of an awful lot of the rest of the roots as well. Now we can see what we're doing. As you can see with this one, we've got no active roots. The few roots that are left I'm going to leave on the ground that they will help anchor the plant in the pot. And that's their only purpose now. This one's not so wet at the base, even though I was expecting it to be, but nonetheless we will still remove all the sheaths. They just store water around the base of the bulbs, which is just not what's wanted. And again we have our little new growth starting, tucked inside a sheath, which I will carefully remove so that the roots can come out. In fact, I can see little root nubbins just starting. So this one, although the new growth is smaller, at least the roots are coming. And this is the important thing. That's what I said. I mean, Jim's been working with these type of plants so long that he just knows what's going to happen next. And that is what's going to happen next. This is going to start growing roots. And if it's in a good media that's kept at the right type of hydration, the right level of feed, and the right pH, that little growth will produce a hell of a root system. So I'm looking for damaged roots now. There's no point in leaving damaged roots. So Jim would just cut those off. He'd plant that with no roots at all. But I'm just going to leave a few of the older ones, pure and simple, to give me something to anchor the plant in the pot, unless they really are bad, like that one and that one. I'll end up taking them all off, I can see it coming. They're all soft. They're not viable. Not really. That one's damaged right at the base. There's no point in leaving that. It's actually broken. That's soggy. Well, if I carry on, I will end up with none, won't I? So we'll stop. We'll just leave those few. They're not going to branch out. They might help hold it upright. And the main problem with planting this is these long dangly leaves that just shouldn't be like that. This is what the leaves should look like. Right, so that's the dark form. So we'll put that off to one side. And much too big. Much too big. And I think it was because that one had so many roots on it, and I didn't want to, because I was potting up, not repotting. I obviously didn't. I wanted to maintain that root mass, and I needed something that big to get it in. I should have taken the bull by the horns and taken the old roots off and put it in a much smaller pot, which is what we will do when we pot these up. So I will have a clear up. Find some more suitable pots for the size of the plants, and then we will get them potted. So yeah, this is where the thinking goes. Yeah, size of pot and choice of media. Now the media that Jim uses is Bees Grow, New Zealand sphagnum moss, perlite and bark. How much perlite can you see in there? How much bark can you see in there? It's nearly all moss, isn't it? It's going to stay too wet. So that's the analysis of what's gone wrong or what wasn't right. I won't say it's gone wrong. The plants aren't dead. I mean, they do have new growths coming and they will grow on. But they'll probably take a year to recover now. And the idea being that these two growths, the new growth on each plant, will grow into a good sized bulb that's plump with a good root system. If by any chance it attempts to flower, I will stop it, and then next time round we should get another even better bulb. Yeah, so that's the idea. That's what I would like them, how I would like them to progress. So I'll have a clear up and I'll be back. Okay, we will carry on thinking. while we're doing this. Well, this is me talking, thinking, but doing it out loud, you know what I mean. Right, we've got perlite. Warning again, don't breathe the dust in, keep it separate. Just take care. Let's get that out of the way. I just wanted you to see it. I mean, you can't read the whole label because they stuck one of those on it, but it's just premium perlite. You can get it anywhere. I got it online. This is the Bees Grow Sphagnum Moss. This is the classic grade. There are various grades. The AAA grade is the really expensive stuff, and that's the long strand stuff that you would use for the Neophonetia type, you know, traditional potting where you have a moss ball, you wrap the moss round and sort of tie the plant in. That's not necessary. The long strand stuff is not necessary for the sort of things I do, so I don't need to spend that amount of money. Right, we will get some moss into soak. Now, when I did this last time, I'm sure I used expressions like heavy on the moss. Well, we won't be doing it again, not this time round. There will be some moss. I've got 2 pots, so if I've got too much it doesn't matter. If I've got too little it becomes a nuisance. Right, so that's the moss, that needs water, which we have some here left over from watering my cooler shady ones this morning, which has got not much, but a little bit of CalMag in it and some seaweed. Not that it matters, because one of these plants hasn't got any roots, so it's not going to use it, is it? We'll get to that bit in a minute. Right, we'll break that up when it gets in the media in a minute. But there's enough there. Most of this water I'm going to squeeze out. I'm not going to actually leave it wet like that. Right, so that's our moss tucked up in one corner. Then in the pots that I've got here, I'm going to put some medium bark in the bottom for crocking, because they've both got air cones. Now, one of these plants has got no roots. How many roots are going to be down in the bottom of the pot in the near future? 0. Do we want the bottom of the pot to stay wet? No. Crocking. And the one that has got a few roots, the roots will be twisted round so that they're not down in the crocking. So an amount of crocking in the bottom of the pot. If the roots get down in there, it's not a big deal. If in a year's time the roots have gone right down and filled the bottom of the pot, it can be lifted out and put in a slightly bigger one. So don't worry about that so much. So that's the pots done. Now our basic mix is going to be small bark, so we start with that. Got 2 pots to do. And I don't want to run out halfway. That's probably enough actually, considering they're cropped, and I'll pop them quite deep, so that's probably more than enough. In fact, it's too much. Why is it too much? Because I want to mix some medium bark in with it this time. Not going to be all small bark. I'm going to put some chunkier stuff in with it. Just to give it a bit. We'll give it a bit more aeration, and the larger bark, strangely enough, doesn't hold as much water. First of all, it takes longer to get wet, and the smaller bark with its tiny little gaps will hold water in the gaps due to capillary attraction. The larger bark doesn't do that. Then we will add our perlite carefully. If you're working with perlite, just do everything slowly and gently. Don't bash around. If you do that, you won't kick the dust up. Already you can see that there's a lot more perlite in this mix than there was last time. And there's still not enough. still want more. Having read up on what this does, it is capable of holding water. If you immerse it in water, it will soak in some water. If you water like I do and pour water through the pot, it won't hold that much water, but what it will do is maintain air and therefore aerate the root area, which is the way I use it. You can grow orchids in it with no other media if you choose to do so. Right, now we'll add the moss. We'll add it a small amount at a time, and I'm going to squeeze virtually all the water out. I've got a plant with no roots here. How much water does it need in the pot? At this point in time, none. You can't use it, can it? It's got no roots. Just making sure we've got no solid bits, which you do get in here. Make sure it's all fluffed up. Now, under normal circumstances, this mix, which I sort of nicknamed the Let's Grow Some Roots mix because it does work quite well for that, I would break the moss up, but not in this case. Jim doesn't break the moss up, he uses it as it comes out the box. And what they do is they mix up a tableful. Their potting bench is sort of probably about 8 foot long by about 3 foot, and it's heaped up this high. It's just pre-mixed. It just dips into it whenever he wants to repot something. It's just ready to go. And I think what they do to make it moist is just go over with a sprayer just to moisten it up. Right, so that's the mix. A lot less moss this time. It's almost a bit too much, quite honestly. I'm going to put some back. Yeah, that's more like it, especially as we've got one with no roots at all. Right, let's see what we can do then. We'll get that out of the way. Put the lid on the perlite, just in case it gets knocked off or knocked over or kicked, and at least it don't all go all over the place. If you've got lids for things, just put the lid back on. Yeah. Right, so the logic here is we've got some moss. These plants like some moss in the pot. If they didn't, then the likes of McBeans and Mathers, which have got giant collections of these odont types, wouldn't use it, would they? If they didn't think it was necessary. So obviously the plants are okay with it. Right, some in the bottom. And we will work on the one with no roots first, because, I was going to say no roots, the one with a few roots. So those roots are actively growing. Unfortunately, no, it is attached. I was just going to say that one looks like it's broken, but it is attached. So what I want to do with this is place those new roots, growing roots, on top of that, and then the rest I'm just going to twist round so that they're in the pot. And then I'm going to rest this plant near the top of the pot so that hopefully it will be self-supporting. And what we don't want is lots of media around that old bulb. So the bit of media that's gone down the back behind that oldest bulb was just bark and perlite. I made sure there was no moss in it. Right, and you don't have to worry about anything other than the roots being covered. That's all we need to do. And the new growth is touching the media, which is what we want. That's it. Short and sweet and simple. I'll put the tag in. Now what are we going to do with that? Under normal circumstances, I'd give it a good soak. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to give it a gentle trickle, and I mean a trickle, next to nothing. That's all it will get. When I come to pot this one up, what am I going to do with that? That's going to get no water at all. It's just going to have the damp moss in the pot. And until I can see those roots growing, it won't get any water. So that's one done. I'll put the dangly leaves down the back of the bench. So I just want to clean those leaves up a bit. There we go, so that's that one done. And we'll have a look at this one. And as I say, this one's got no viable roots. Yeah? All the roots that I've left on there are going to do nothing but hopefully hold the plant in place. So that's all that's going to happen here. So we'll sit them down somewhere so that they can have some moss on top of them. And then again we will put non-mossy type stuff down behind the oldest bulb, which is highly unlikely to ever grow roots. That way it won't stay wet around the base of that bulb. And then the mossy type stuff will go around the front, where we know we've got roots coming very, very soon, because we can see the nubbins starting to show. So that's where we want the more mossy type stuff. Now if this had a good root system, we wouldn't be pressing the media down, but it hasn't. I'm pressing the media down purely to hopefully hold it still. And it's not going to hold still, and I know why, because of those great big long dangly leaves. So I'm going to have to hold that at the back. So I'll just go and get a few bits and pieces and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I'll be back. Right, I'm going to have to get cracking because my battery's going to go soon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stake stuck on the outside. The one thing I will do is I'll have to use the pliers. Where the stake's going to go, I'm going to take a chunk out of the pot because it's got a lip on it and it will stop the stake going right back against the edge of the pot. So I'm just going to take a chunk out so that the stake can go flat. And then we will have a piece of duct tape. I use duct tape because its sticking power is tremendous. It's so good that sometimes you get it stuck to your fingers and you can't let go. It's that good. So we'll have a piece of duct tape like that. We will hold our stake where we want it, which is there, into that groove. Put our duct tape over the top. Make sure it's where we want it. Stick the duct tape down. That way we've got a very firm stake that we don't have to worry about. Then we will get a clip. And I'll use a grabby clip, one of these. These are good, these are. And I will clip round the top of the bulb where that thin piece is. There we go. And that's got the plant. Now all I need to do is make sure that the base of the new growth has media. So that just means topping it up a little bit. Yep, happy with that. Tag. And as I said, I'm not going to water this. I'm going to keep my eye on it. The amount of moisture that's in that moss will dry off quite quickly. The bark will absorb that and then we will end up with a dry pot. And I will keep my eye on those roots, and as soon as I see them move we will add a small amount of water to the top of the pot. And then gradually, as the roots progress down in the pot, we will start adding a bit more moisture. And Jim's advice with these, when they've been repotted, no feed of any sort for 2 months. I don't think I would exclude seaweed extract. They might get a bit of that, sneak it in, you know, I won't tell Jim. So, there we go. Those plants I paid an awful lot of money for. I could look at it on the grounds that, well, it wasn't my money, but yes it was. This was paid for by donations. I can't afford orchids at that value, I just can't. If you want to know how much it is, you'll have to go back and find the video. But I bought them at Wisley, so there would have been an orchid haul following a video from Wisley. Yeah, so you can go and find it if you want to see the first look at what these plants were like then. And I'll do pop-ups of the blooms. So we've got the this is the pale form, so you've got a look at that one. I love these types of blooms. I mean, I wouldn't pay that sort of money for blooms I didn't really like. You know, I don't pay lots of money for a rare plant. I don't work like that. I run a YouTube channel. You people come to hear about plants, see me work with them, and see some nice attractive blooms. So its rarity doesn't matter to me. I'm more interested in how nice it looks when it's in bloom. As I said, I'm running a YouTube channel here, so I have a slightly different outlook than some other people, perhaps. And then this one is the dark form. I'll put the pop-up of the bloom for that one. And hopefully these will now progress. I've done all I can. I've put all the thought into what was wrong. I've had to wait for these new growths really to go through this repot. That had to happen. And now that it has happened, I'm hoping they will progress because we've taken on board everything that wasn't right last time round. Even though at the time I thought it was. It's one of these things, on reflection, not quite as I expected. Okay, so that's today's video. I'm pleased with the way these have potted up. As I say, they're two nice blooms, and hopefully we will recover these plants and then we can let them bloom again. So there we go. See you next time. My battery's got about 6 minutes left. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.